So yes, Morbius definitely isn't a perfect superhero comic book movie, but it really isn't that bad either. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel Lifestyle Critic. I hope you're having a brilliant day. So in this video we are going to be reviewing Morbius, which is the long-awaited second character to feature in Sony's Spider-Man universe of characters. Now the trailer for this movie was a little bit confusing as it seemed to have elements from all three of the very distinct and very different Spider-Man character universes. Now I think that they did this on purpose as they wanted to see the reception of No Way Home, which obviously is going to bring together all three Spider-Man universe characters together, and then they wanted to decide based upon the reception from that movie to decide which universe Morbius is going to be a part of. Now I think that this character is part of Andrew Garfield's Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man universe, which really would be absolutely extraordinary as Andrew Garfield absolutely smashed it in not only those two Amazing Spider-Man universe character movies, but also in No Way Home, where he was absolutely brilliant. So it would be really cool if both Venom and Morbius and now Vulture are going to be part of that universe. But as far as this video is concerned, I'm going to be breaking Morbius down for you and explaining why it's really not that bad of a movie. So the storyline in this movie acts as a bit of an origin storyline for the Michael Morbius character, an award-winning scientist who ultimately becomes a living vampire. Now he is so much stronger than traditional living vampires. He's got super strength, super hearing, super flight, which is really cool, and the film then explores what this character is going to do next when he is transformed into this bat-like vampiric character. Now from a positives point of view, I really like the dark horror aspects of this movie. They really embraced it. I mean, it's not a total horror movie, but there are some sequences in this movie which are really terrifying, really do put a chill down your spine, and I feel like they integrated them into this superhero comic book universe really well. And I absolutely love the family bond that they created between the Michael Morbius character and the character that Matt Smith is ultimately playing, and the fact that these two characters are so close and the things that happen to both of them in this movie was just so powerful, as like I said, these two are so close from a relationship point of view, and the things that transpire in this movie were just so powerful because of the fact that both its lead characters were so close. I feel like that was really cool, and ultimately this movie does feel a lot smaller in scale, which is actually pretty refreshing. I mean, most superhero movies have a bit of an end of the world aspect to them, whereas this time they really did focus on these few characters in this small town, in this small area, and really focusing on the vampire horror aspects of the storyline, which I did actually think was really interesting. And they weren't afraid also to kill off quite a number of different characters that they were introducing in this origin movie, which does make it pretty radical. However, from a negatives point of view, I have to say, you know, this movie, whilst it does have some strength, it does feel very dated and does have a bit of a 90s superhero comic book aspect to it. It does feel a little bit bland in certain places. Some of the cinematography, some of the locations, some of the places that they go to do feel pretty empty, and I wonder if the lifelessness aspect of this movie was purposeful, as obviously vampires are undead characters, so maybe this was a purposeful thing as they wanted to introduce it as part of this aesthetic. By the end of this movie, all of the multiverse logic that is taking place doesn't really seem consistent with what you've seen in No Way Home, and I do feel like this movie does feel really rushed in a very similar way to how Venom Let There Be Carnage does feel like a bit of a roller coaster. And I feel like if both of those movies, if they did expand upon them in terms of just exploring characters a little bit more and just having a bit more of an involved storyline, they could have benefited a lot. And I also do think there are storyline strands that you have seen in other movies as well, and I feel like from a CGI point of view, in some respects it does overly rely on CGI. I mean, to its credit, it does look pretty cool, but it does feel like a bit of a cartoon CGI fight happening at points, instead of these cool living vampire characters, which, like I said, you have seen being done better in other vampire adaptations, in TV shows, and in other movies. So whilst this movie definitely isn't a perfect movie, I do still think that there is enjoyment to be had from a storyline perspective. So from a casting characters point of view, they don't have that many characters in this movie, and quite a lot of them, like I said before, they do actually kill off in this movie, which is really surprising. So let's go through the main three right now. So the first one, of course, is Jared Leto, who brilliantly brings to life the Michael Morbius character. He is a bit of a doctor, and I love the analogy that they have with this character, that he starts off as a healer and then becomes a killer, which is really, really game-changing, I think. And right in the beginning of this movie, they show that he does have a bit of a rare blood disease, which makes it really difficult for him to walk around. And I absolutely love the transformation that they have and the growth that they have with this character as he is transforming and becoming a living vampire. I guess they could have pushed that aspect a little bit more in terms of really exploring all of the brutal transformations that this character goes through. But that being said, from a character arc point of view, I do actually think that Jared Leto's character does go on a really great arc across this movie. Like I mentioned before as well, his performance is a little bit lifeless, especially compared to other performances from Jared Leto. I do think maybe they did this on purpose as they wanted to subvert audiences' expectations, but I do think it kind of works within this world that they are creating, and it's really interesting as well to see what this character is going to do when he's struck with this new identity where he is always having a craving and a thirst and a lust for human blood, and seeing how on earth he's going to navigate this is really, really interesting. Next up we have Matt Smith, who, like I said, was absolutely brilliant as the co-lead in this movie as the Milo character, and he is a surrogate brother to Michael Morbius, and he is also struck with the same blood disease that Michael Morbius has, and I thought it was an absolutely epic conflict between both of these characters, and actually is really, really unique as these two characters are so close to one another, and so they care a lot about each other and they really want to have the best for each other, and then at the same time they are able to totally rip each other's hearts out, which is just absolutely extraordinary. And I just feel like from a characterization point of view, both of these characters, because of the fact that they were so close, just means that you can really be connected with them when they go down a bit of a troubled path, which I just thought was so brilliantly acted by Matt Smith. And by contrast to Michael Morbius' character, this guy is just fully embracing all of the things that happen to him, and I just feel like Matt Smith gives a really captivating and truly charismatic performance. And in some respects, I really went back to Amazing Spider-Man 2 with the Harry Osborn and Peter Parker relationship, and I think both of these characters, along with Matt Smith's performance and Jared Leto's performance, is really close, and just the chaos that happens when two characters are just so close and then what happens to them afterwards was just brilliantly portrayed by all of the different actors. And then finally we have Adriana Arjona, who was really, really great as well as the Martine character, the scientist and girlfriend to Michael Morbius, and she is really helping him stay on the right path. And of course she is then obviously being able to be a bit of a target, as she is also so close to the heart of the Michael Morbius character. And so I feel like from a casting character's point of view, actually this movie is really, really great. So from a visuals point of view, you know, a lot of people have said that the visuals in this movie are really, really bland, really, really empty, and not really that engaging at all. And yes, you know, it is very different. It's not as vibrant as a typical MCU movie, but I think, you know, it is quite consistent in its tonal identity, and it is trying to focus a lot more on the darker, edgier, more horror aspects. And like I said, there really are a lot of horror-based sequences in this movie that are really, really chilling. And from a CGI point of view, it is a bit of a CGI love fest. A lot of focus, obviously, on the Michael Morbius character transforming into this living vampire. And to its credit, I actually think the design is okay, a lot stronger than Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. Those zombies weren't looking as brilliant as I think Michael Morbius transforming into this living vampire looks. All of the vampire abilities are really, really wicked. I think the fight sequences could have been a little bit stronger, as at points it does look like a little bit of a CGI blur, and I would have loved to have seen a little bit more from all of the fight sequences. But that being said, you know, I do feel like the CGI does hold up for what it's trying to do. I mean, certain aspects as well do look and feel very 90s, but I think it still worked relatively well for the specific storyline and the vision that they were setting with Morbius. So from a comparison point of view, yes, Morbius is probably one of the weaker superhero comic book movies ever made. But that being said, I don't think it's an all-in-all out really awful movie. And I think, you know, there are actually comparisons that you can make with other films. I think most notably, definitely, you can compare it to the recently released Fox's New Mutants movie, which was definitely a bit of a smaller scale, darker vibe, trying to go for a bit of a horror aesthetic, and I feel like Morbius is actually pretty similar to that. From an origin point of view, of course, it's not as good as Iron Man, Captain America, Spider-Man, but I do think actually it's pretty much on the same level as Ben Affleck's Daredevil movie. I think you can also compare it very much to Venom and the second Venom movie as well, especially as both of those movies take place in the same universe as Morbius. Of course, you can compare it to Spider-Man. I think there were a lot of little Easter eggs that they were dropping about all of the wider Spider-Man world, and I can't wait to see which Spider-Man character is actually going to be in this particular movie. I think it's also pretty similar to the second Blade movie as well. Michael Morbius, the living vampire, was actually going to appear in the second Blade movie all the way back in the 90s. A shame that we didn't get to see that, but I do feel like it's a little bit similar to that movie, and of course this version of Michael Morbius will eventually come face to face with Mahershala Ali's Blade character, which would be absolutely wicked. I love also the line that they reference with the Hulk as well, where Morbius was saying, you don't want to see me when I'm hungry. And of course you can probably compare it to Twilight movies as well, especially from a vampire point of view. So from a comparisons perspective, actually there's quite a lot of movies that you can compare Morbius to. So overall with Morbius, I had a relatively decent time watching this movie. It's definitely not as good as the other MCU brilliant suite of movies are, or as good as DCEU can be, especially with the recently released The Batman movie. But that being said, I don't think this movie is really awful either. It is a bit of a shame that the director did spoil a lot of the post-credit scenes, and it does ultimately feel like Sony just wanted to rush this movie out to get on with the future aspects of the wider Sony Spider-Man universe of characters. So I wish that this movie would have had a little bit more focus. I feel like it could have improved a lot if they had expanded out a little bit, focused a lot more on characters, made all of the fight sequences a lot stronger, and just didn't make it as rushed or as bland as the movie ultimately is. But for all of those reasons, I'm going to give it a solid 4.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear what you thought of Morbius, so please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.